my friends, and thank you for joining us for another edition of True Talk. In June, I had the opportunity to give two different presentations with roughly the same content to audiences here in Taiwan of business owners, senior leaders, HR leaders, and executives on the topic of how to help foreign hires, foreign talent, expatriates who come to Taiwan to work, how to help them adjust to the work culture and also the national culture here in Taiwan. Now, in the process of preparing for these talks, I conducted a number of interviews with expatriates in my circle. Some of them are people who I coach or have coached in the past, and I asked them about their experiences and observations. What I heard back was a mix of positives. For example, working in Taiwan, you experience the warmth and the considerate nature of your colleagues here in Taiwan and other people that you meet outside of work. Taiwan is a very welcoming culture for expatriates. A lot of people might mention things like the food that they very much enjoy. There were a lot of positives. Now, there were some things that were also a little bit challenging. One of those things I found very interesting was that a lot of the expatriates who move here from countries where it's okay to debate in a meeting. In a meeting, it's okay to have differences of opinion and to express those differences of opinion. They find that here, very often people don't say what they really think, especially if they disagree with something that they've heard in a meeting. Now, an interesting fact is that I also coach and work with a number of Taiwanese leaders and also folks who are individual contributors who also experience frustration with this phenomenon. In other words, that they'll say something like, "True, how do I get my team members and my colleagues to express how they really think in meetings?" A lot of times they feel that there's no way to get that done. It's a roadblock that exists because of the culture here, which emphasizes harmony in group situations, where the way that we interact with people is studied and watched. Anyone who studies intercultural topics will realize that here in Taiwan, we lean a little more towards the high context side of the culture map. High context meaning that there is meaning in body language. There is meaning not just in what is said, but also in what is not said. So that's one of the reasons for that, and it does cause some stress or frustration even for natives here in Taiwan. Another thing that exists is this emphasis on the needs of the group versus the individual, whereas in other cultures, the individual's needs are just as important as the group's needs, and perhaps even more important. And so expressing how you really feel, sticking to a position and debating for your position is very normal, whereas here it's probably inappropriate in a lot of situations. Another thing that exists is this concept of power distance. So power distance is really talking about whether the culture is more hierarchical or more sort of equal. Everybody's the same, even if you have a higher title. Or, okay, so this is my boss's boss, but we can still treat each other as equals in conversation. In Taiwan, there's a bit more of a sense of hierarchy, and that we have to respect people for their positions in the organization, and that we should not challenge them in group situations. That's very bad here. One of the results of this phenomenon, impacted very much by culture, is that things that maybe some members of the group feel should be discussed in the group situation are not discussed in the group situation. They're discussed after the meeting in one-on-one types of situations or in very small groups. What did you really think? Oh, when you heard that, did you agree or disagree? There'll be very open conversations after the meeting. And why does this happen? Well, it's a matter of trust, isn't it? It's a matter of safety. So if I'm in a meeting and I feel like if I express my opinion, I may be challenging someone in authority in a way that will bring negative consequences for me, I probably won't speak up. If I feel like saying that I disagree with a peer in front of other peers will cause that peer to lose face, to feel upset, then I will emphasize the harmony of the relationship over the expression of exactly what I think. I will use other channels, sometimes not so effective, right? It takes more time. and a bit more roundabout, which is something that causes frustration, I think, for everyone. So what are some practical solutions that we can consider to manage this situation? The first thing you can do if you are an expatriate working in Taiwan is to realize that this is culture. So it's not necessarily a wrong thing or a bad thing. For many people in the room, it's a normal thing. So I usually advise expatriates to avoid comparing, avoid comparisons. Say, well, back where I worked before, it was like this. I worked in 3 other countries and we could always debate and talk openly about issues. Why can't we do that here? Something's wrong here. This kind of thinking will not help you. It's much better to look at it objectively and say, it is what it is. Now, how do we manage the situation given what it is? Another tip is to focus first on building trust and connection among the members of the group. And what does that mean? What that means is that we know each other well enough and we respect each other enough that we know it's okay to say what we really think. One of my dear friends who is a huge fan of Taiwan and has lived here for many, many decades, an American, once observed that how do you know? How do you know when a Taiwanese colleague or a friend takes you as a true equal, not the foreign colleague or the foreign friend? He said, it's when they tell you exactly what they think. And my observation as a member of a Taiwanese family is, yeah, there's really not a lot held back. The communication is polite and respectful, but it's also extremely direct in these trusting family relationships. So at work, we're not going to become family members, but how do we make it so that it's safe for us to express exactly what we think to each other? And that's really about what you do to build a relationship, to be mutually supportive, to understand each other, to listen to each other, all of these things that build trust. Now, once you've got a reasonable level of trust within a group, what you can do is you can ask a question that very few groups or teams will ever ask, and that is, how do we want to disagree? Or how do we want to manage situations where we may have differences of opinion? Do we want to keep quiet about that? Do we want to have, anonymous polls and then we collect information and figure out what to do? Or would we prefer to have a situation where we can agree on how we can express our disagreement and we can agree that that is welcome, and we can talk about when it's welcome, some steps, an SOP, something that's very clear. We would call this a meeting norm around coming to a decision or discussing things where we begin far apart and we're not really close together. So meeting norms is something seldom discussed on teams. A lot of what I do in team coaching is to help teams set up norms for things like this because they've had trouble doing it on their own. But if you have a vision of what it might need to be and you're willing to facilitate that, I highly encourage you to do it. If you need some tips or some advice on exactly how to get that done effectively, reach out. You can email me anytime. You can also send me a private message on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find anywhere. I'm very accessible if you have any specific questions about how to get this done. This is our True Talk for this season. Thank you very much for listening.